Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me tonight. It's really fun to be here. I'm just so glad you're here. I wanted to try something different and try an evening, so maybe more of you could join me. And if you have any questions or comments or anything, I'm streaming on YouTube and Facebook. I'm hoping they're both working. I've never done both before, so let me know. Put your comments in there. Let me know if you can hear me. I see a few coming in from YouTube. Hi from Idaho, Connecticut, Denver, New York. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Thanks for joining me tonight. There's a Facebook. Thanks, Diane. I'm really excited to be here and to talk to you kind of about what the parks are going to look like next year. I think it's really important to have this conversation now before, because we're kind of in a lull with the holidays coming up and everything, and trying to get some kind of a step up on the planning as much as we can for next year. So I wanted to talk about what I noticed this year as I was traveling, and just a few different things that I want to share with you. So hi, you guys are all over the place. Thank you for leaving your comments. This is so fun. And I hope to be able to do this on YouTube from here on out. It's really fun to be able to have more people join us today. And I'm just going to jump right in because I want to leave time for you guys to ask any questions that you might have, or any comments, and we can talk about kind of the trips that you have planned and maybe more specific parks. So I know that your time is valuable, and I'm just going to jump in with the 10 things that I think you need to know before visiting the national parks next year. So I'm going to put up a slideshow. Hopefully it works here. Let me know if you can see that. I'm sharing my screen here. If not, I can just talk, but if you can see it, that'd be awesome. So the 10 things you need to know before visiting the national parks next year. The first thing, and this probably goes without saying, so I know a lot of you travel to the national parks quite often. That's often a vacation of choice for you. So I'm talking to people who maybe don't travel to the national parks as much, or maybe if you're on the fence a little bit about traveling to the parks. But the first thing that I want you to know, no slides visible. Okay, it's not working. Then I'll just turn that off. Thank you for letting me know, Deb. I appreciate that. I'll just turn that off then. Okay, so then you just get to look at my face. So the first thing that I want you to know is that national park vacations are probably some of the best vacations that you can take next year. So if you're on the fence, or if you don't usually go to national parks and you're not quite sure what to expect, I just want to put that out there for those of you that are in that situation, that national parks really are like some of the best vacations you can take during this weird time. And I'll outline that a little bit more as we keep talking, but it really surprised me actually this summer as we were traveling how normal it felt. And people were being pretty cautious, but the national parks, like I just want to give a huge shout out to all the park rangers and administration in the parks this year, because they nailed it. It really didn't feel that different. And so I just wanted to point that out. It's a good place to go. It's good for your mental health. They opened them up, and a lot of people were able to get to the parks and have a good experience with nature. So, okay. You say this first slide was working. I'm seeing that. Okay. Well, I will try it again. Can you see that? There's some photos of Glacier Bay, great sand dunes. Anyway. Okay, so I'm going to go into the next one, because even though the national parks are a great place to go, one thing that I did notice is that the popular parks were so busy this year. And actually what's crazy, I've been following this kind of, Yellowstone is a good example of this, but oh my gosh. So they just released some of their visitor statistics. And so for the month of August 2020, visitation was up 7%. Oh, you guys can't see me. Okay, I'll just make my face big and we won't worry about slides. Okay, So in August for 2020, visitation in Yellowstone was up 7%, which is just crazy, actually, over August of 2019. So 7% more people came to Yellowstone in August this year than last year. So I was pretty surprised about that. But then they released their September numbers, and their September numbers were 21% higher this year than they were last year. So what that means for you is you're just going to have a better plan. Like if you're going to go to some of these bigger parks, and give me a shout out if you're thinking about it. I'm talking like Glacier, Yellowstone, Yosemite, you've got Rocky Mountain, Great Smoky Mountains. What are some of those other big ones? Grand Teton. A lot of those parks are just, I think, are going to be slammed next year. First of all, because people figured it out this year that the national parks were a great place to go. But a lot of people are itching to get on vacation next year. And almost everyone I've talked to, even people that don't usually go to national parks, are now coming to me and saying, I don't go to Yellowstone, I don't go to Grand Teton, I've never been to these places, but we have a big family vacation plan there next year, which is awesome. But I'm just going to say it is going to be slammed if you're going to those bigger parks. So I see, okay, Glacier, Yellowstone, Zion. Yes, thank you, Zion. How can I forget that? I'm from Utah. Okay. Yeah, Banff, Glacier, Yellowstone, Teton. So if you're going to those bigger parks, I don't want you to not go. That's not what I'm recommending, but what I am recommending is to maybe try to go during times that are less busy, or just make sure you have a really, really good, solid plan. And if you're going to any of those parks, if you're thinking of going to any of those parks in 2021, make sure you get your lodging and everything now. So, for Yellowstone, I've had my lodging for Yellowstone for next summer. I've had that booked since May of this year. And so some of them are already open. I know Glacier, like they usually open their lodging like 13 months in advance. So a lot of it's already been open. So if you're planning on going to any of those, check the lodging, make sure that you're all set, and then make sure you know what you're going to do day to day and where you want to be, and just how to avoid the crowds, which is what Dirt in My Shoes will help you with. But I just want to put that out there. It's going to be so critical next year. I really don't think that the parks are going to be as quiet as they were this year. I think it's going to be worse. And so on that note, I'm a little uncertain where I want to go, just because I'm trying to decide if those bigger parks are going to be a good destination for me this year, or if I want to try out some different places. So if you have any questions about those bigger parks and kind of what to expect, let me know, because I can help you navigate through the crowds to a really good extent. I can do that. But I do think that the parks are going to be pretty slammed next year, especially those big ones. So, Acadia. Yes, thanks, Roberta. Acadia. Do I think they'll cap the number of visitors? We'll get to that. Let me get to that. But for the most part, no, I don't think they will. So, okay, backcountry permits. So the backcountry is a good option. That is a really good point, Alicia. Thank you. If you're going to some of those bigger parks, maybe look into some backcountry permits. There's some trails that you can do that are just like a few miles long. You don't have to go too far, and it's still camping, but that would help you get away from the crowds for sure. So when do backcountry permits open for most parks? Most parks, you're looking about 6 months, 6 months out from the date, but it does vary. Like Yellowstone, I don't know particularly about Yellowstone, but like Grand Teton, I know they usually open their backcountry permits January of the year. So theirs will be opening up soon. So yeah, so that's another option too. So yeah, some of you have already booked your lodging. Good. You're the ones who are ahead of the curve there. And again, just like make sure you're not just planning the lodging part of it, but you're also planning like what you're actually going to do when you get there and where you want to be and what you want to see, so that you can kind of crowd control it a little bit. Lauren already bought the itinerary. Yeah, that will help for sure. So if you're going to those bigger parks, I feel like I would be doing you a disservice to say you don't need a Dirt in My Shoes itinerary, but it really will make a huge difference. So I just want to say that because those parks are going to be crazy. So let's move on to the next one, and I'll kind of go through all of these comments. If I don't specifically answer your questions here tonight, I will go through and make sure I answer you online later, but I will try to keep up with those comments as good as I can. So, okay, so the third thing that I think you need to know before you go to the parks next year is that reservations may be required. And there's been a lot of questions surrounding this, and so I want to just sit here for a while and kind of talk it through. So we've got, we had a few parks this year. So we've got Yosemite and Rocky Mountain were the main ones that made you have reservations to even enter the park this year. So those ones, and just to be clear, none of these parks have really announced what they're doing next year. I don't think anybody knows, and I don't unfortunately have a crystal ball, so I'm just going off what I think will happen. So again, Yosemite and Rocky Mountain required reservations to enter. Zion required reservations for their shuttle, which takes you into the main part of the park. One park that I do know for sure next year is doing reservations is Acadia. So if you're planning on going to Acadia, they are for sure doing reservations. They were planning on doing that even before COVID. So that's been in the works for years, and they're finally starting a reservation system for Cadillac Mountain and Sand Beach, which is a huge deal. It's a huge deal if you've been to Acadia during the peak season, because it gets crazy. So those reservations should help. So in addition to those parks needing reservations, Arches also talked about possibly doing reservations this summer, but they didn't get it up and running. As well as Glacier also talked about doing reservations, and they didn't get it up and running, or they decided not to do it this year. So those parks, there are some other parks that I would just keep an eye on that may require reservations. And I got a lot of questions this year, kind of some confusion around the reservation stuff. If the park didn't like explicitly say that you needed a reservation to enter, then there wasn't anything in the works for that. So next year, I would imagine that it will be pretty similar or less reservations needed. But again, here's an interesting thing is that Arches, for example, has been talking about doing reservations for years. Because if you've been to Arches, you know that if you go into the park during the summer, like after 9 o'clock, sometimes they have to actually shut down the park until people leave, and then they let more people come in. So they've been talking about doing that for a while. And I think in my mind, I'm thinking that, you know, what happened this summer and with COVID and with different parks putting reservation systems in, I would expect actually for some of those reservation systems to kind of expand a little bit. And I don't know what that's going to look like, and I don't know which parks or anything, but I know that a lot of parks have already kind of been thinking in that way. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some type of reservation systems stay active for next year. So I do have some questions here. Okay. So, and also if the park, like I had questions about Zion where you needed reservations for the shuttle, but you did not need reservations to enter. And so that one was an interesting one. And I don't think they'll make you have reservations to enter, because the shuttle caps people pretty well when they have the reservations. So let me look at these questions coming in right now. Let's see. I'm going to try to do ones that are related to this. Oh, okay. Susan says a lot of places in or near Glacier are already booked for the summer. Yeah. And a lot of people, yes, you're right. A lot of people rolled them over to next summer. So when people couldn't go this year, they just called the place up and said, well, I just want to have the same dates for next year. And you're right. A lot of people did do that. So again, if you don't have reservations yet, definitely get on that as soon as you can. David, news about reservations for Lassen Volcanic and Crater Lake. No, I haven't heard anything about those parks. Also, those parks, as far as I'm aware, weren't too slammed. Those are some smaller ones. And so they didn't have any reservations this year. I would be really surprised if they did next year. How do reservations work with camping? Can you leave and re-enter? Yeah, so it depends on the park. So like Rocky Mountain, your reservations were for the day. And you could come and go as long as you entered at a certain time that your reservation time was. And so that one, you could come and go for the day, but you would need reservation for each day that you're there. And Yosemite's were 7-day reservations. So you made your reservation once, and then you had 7 days to go in and out of the park. And Zion, the shuttle was a daily thing. You had to get shuttle tickets for every day. So our daughter went to Arches this summer without reservations. Yeah, they didn't get their reservations up and going, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had them next year. Okay, where will it say on the park website if reservations are needed? Yes, so when you go to nps.gov and you find the park that you're going to, up at the top in the corner, there's this button that says alerts. And if you click on that, that will take you to like all the things that they want you to know at that time. And so the parks that required reservations had in the alerts that you needed reservations. So definitely do that. Charlie Young, what about Grand Canyon? Grand Canyon didn't take reservations this year. And that one was kind of a hard one this year. I would say out of all the big parks that I saw that, tried to get up and running fast this summer, Grand Canyon was the hardest because they border Native American land, and the Native Americans shut down a lot of their borders. And so you couldn't go in one entrance of the Grand Canyon at all. And then they weren't running their shuttles for a long time, which makes it really hard to get out to some of the places, some of the viewpoints in the Grand Canyon. And so that one was a challenge for sure. I got a lot of questions about that one, trying to kind of piece people's vacations back together with all the closures. So, okay, Starlyn, do you think May will be as crazy? Honestly, yes. I do. I don't think it will be as bad as the summer. But here's the crazy thing that I saw this year was a lot of people were emailing me and saying, I'm going to Yellowstone in October. You know, what should we do? Or I'm going to Glacier in October. And I'm thinking, not in the 6 years I've been running this website have I ever had so many questions about people going in the off season and trying to navigate like around the snow and the weather related closures. I've never seen it before. So this year, like I said, Yellowstone said they had a 21% increase this year in visitation in September. And I was just shocked at how many people were still emailing me in October and saying I'm going to Yellowstone. So I do think May will be crazier than normal. So if we reserve a campsite inside the park, would that include a reservation? Yes, most of the time it does. Yeah, as far as I'm aware. I know for Yosemite for sure, but you would want to check on Rocky Mountain. That one I'm not clear on, actually, because they were doing the daily. So, okay. Jim, how many national parks do you provide itineraries for? I think I have 10 parks up there. I'm trying to stick to the bigger parks that really need a lot of help and so to navigate through. And so I have 10, but I am writing more. So it's been a little while since I've had new ones, and I'm really excited. We just got, if you're following me on Facebook, we just got back from South Dakota, which we go to South Dakota pretty much yearly, but I'm writing a Black Hills itinerary. So Mount Rushmore, Badlands, Wind Cave, some of Custer, Devil's Tower. So I'm really excited about that one. But yeah, I am writing more. So let's see. Okay. Lisa, I heard Mini Glacier Hotel was closed this year. Yes, it was closed in 2020. However, I have not heard anything for 2021. And I know of a few people who got reservations for 2021. I would be really shocked if they keep the Native American reservation, the east side of Glacier, closed next year, just because they are so dependent on tourism. And I don't know any business really that could go 2 years without any business. So, I think that will play into it. Of course, they want to keep themselves safe and hopefully things will be better by next summer than they are now. But I would make reservations. I think that Mini Glacier will probably be open. Okay, let's see. Oh, Nancy went to Grand Canyon 4 times in 2020, went in August on a Thursday, and it was empty. Yeah, I mean, some of these parks, so people were saying like even Rocky Mountain and Yosemite, the ones that take reservations, because they capped them at like 60% capacity. And people were just like, oh my gosh, I've never been to the park when it's been so lovely. And so that's kind of, if you want to look on the bright side of things, the people who were able to get reservations didn't have to deal with as much of the overcrowding issues. So, okay, let's see. Do I think Alaska will be accessible? That's a hard one. I mean, if you fly, maybe, but then, this year the Canadian border was closed, and I think it still is. I don't even think, I know they keep postponing the opening. So, so if you were going to drive, I think that would be a lot more iffy than flying. But yeah, I know people have been going to Alaska, and I know, Katmai, they, for the bear viewing, their peak is July, and they were not open then, but they did open for their September, which is their second peak. So yeah, I mean, I think personally, and I kind of mentioned this before, where I'm still trying to decide kind of what I want my summer to look like next year. I'm not thinking about some of those bigger, further away trips as much, just because there's a lot more uncertainty surrounding that versus somewhere you can road trip to, or somewhere that's closer to home. And, it's been really cool to be able to discover places that are maybe a little bit closer to you that, you maybe have not taken the time to go to. There's a lot of hidden gems out there, that are not the bigger, more exciting parks. And so for me personally, my family, we have reservations to go to Hawaii next year, and I'm iffy about it. I don't know that I want to count on that. So we don't have plane tickets yet or anything, because I don't know. And so we are kind of focusing more on the closer parks that we can drive to, or that aren't just like a big production to get through. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. But again, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what it's going to look like. But that's kind of where I sit, and that I'm a little more. I don't take as many risks when it comes to stuff like that. So, and let's see, we're hearing that the Canadian border is still closed. So yeah, okay. Okay, so I'm going to move past reservations, but if you have additional questions on those, that really should only affect a small number of parks, but I did want to point that out, that it could be a possibility. So you'll just want to follow the parks on social media. That's a great way to do it, because they announce stuff that way, or go to the nps.gov site and click on alerts and just check it, once a week or so until your vacation, and just see kind of what is happening and what changes are being made. And on another note of that, I think that a lot of those parks aren't going to even know or decide probably until February or March-ish is usually when they start announcing any changes or anything that they're making for the following summer or for the upcoming summer. So that's another thing too. You may not see any updates for a little while, especially as we get into the holiday season. So you might just want to wait and just be watching because things can change at any point. So, okay, so I'm going to move on to number 4. Which is that you may still encounter closures next year. And by closures, I mean what we saw this year was mostly the trails, overlooks, things like that stayed open. The things that closed were like the lodges, visitor centers, restaurants, more of like the infrastructure stuff. And just to kind of give you an idea of why and how it's going to be different for every park, because like they were saying in Grand Teton this year, so they had to shut down the Jackson Lake Lodge, which is a huge lodge. It can fit a lot of people, but the main reason behind that was actually because they don't have good employee housing that would allow their employees to not be just kind of like crammed in there and susceptible to sickness. So, you know, a lot of these places made choices not to open lodges and restaurants for that reason, because it was hard for them to get employees and employees situated in the park housing that they have. And so that's why, you know, I got a lot of questions. Well, why is it open here in this park and they're not open in this park? A lot of it has to do with the staffing and things like that. So again, it's going to be kind of hard to see what exactly next year is going to look like. But my guess is, and like I said, when we traveled the parks this summer, it felt pretty normal because the sites were still open. You know, you could still go and see Old Faithful, maybe just not stay in the Old Faithful Inn. You know, and so, and like they did a lot of grab and go for restaurants. However, I will say that, and this is for inside the park, because the towns outside of the parks, we typically encountered a lot of open restaurants and lodges because people, you know, again, those towns rely on tourism so heavily that we were still able to find good food and places to stay outside of the parks. It was just more limited inside of the parks. Now, the other thing is with visitor centers, what they did for the first little bit, they were closed, but then they started like the rangers would put a table outside with a map and with all their stuff, and they just stand outside and answer questions that way, and then just encourage people to wear masks and stuff. So again, I think next year will feel more normal, but that's what makes a national park trip so great, is because most of what you're there to see is outside. And so it just wasn't affected as much by closures and things like that, because you could still go see things. So again, those are the types. Other parks like Carlsbad Caverns and Gateway Arch, Mammoth Cave, Channel Islands, some of those parks that required you to be in more enclosed spaces, those ones had a harder time opening up this summer. And so kind of keep that in mind too if you're thinking of going to some of those parks. However, a lot of those did figure out ways to still allow people to visit. So again, that's just expect some closures, but you know, most of the main stuff was still open this year, which is great. So let's see. Okay, I am going to go on to number 5. Okay, this is a big one. Okay, number 5. The 5th thing you need to know before visiting the parks next year is that the campgrounds are going to be crazy. So I don't see any way that they're not going to be, truthfully. I think that it's going to be insane. So if you're planning on camping, give me a shout out, kind of which parks you're hoping to camp in, or if you have any questions surrounding camping. And while you're doing that, I'll just kind of talk through what we noticed this year as we were traveling. And that is that some parks closed down, like mostly they're first come, first serve. There are campgrounds that were reserve only already, typically stayed open okay, because they already had the system in place to take reservations. But some of these parks had to shut down some of their campgrounds, which made demand for campgrounds just like massive. And so it was crazy. There are campgrounds that I have never ever seen full anytime that I visited. So I was a park ranger in Grand Teton, so I know that park really well, and I'm in that park a lot. And the Grovant campground, I mean, oh my gosh, that campground hardly ever fills. Sometimes it fills like around, you're talking like 5 or 6 in the evening usually, if it fills at all. And it was filling at 11, but you had to be in line for it by like 9 a.m. because you had to wait in line for 2 hours. They were like slammed. And so those first come, first serve campgrounds were just, I mean, they were just filling up like that. And I think it will be the same next year. I think that there may be a few more campgrounds open in each park. But I mean, people are discovering these national parks. A lot of people bought travel trailers and RVs this year, planning on going camping because it's, you know, you're more self-enclosed. You're not having to be in shared spaces as much when you're camping. And so a lot of people discovered that. So I really think if you can get a reservation, even if it may not be in exactly the spot you want. If you can get a camping reservation, take it. I wouldn't pass those up. If there's any available, I would snag them. And then if you have to rely on first come, first serve, just be aware. I mean, you're talking probably getting up at 5 or 6 a.m. to go over and get a first come, first serve site. I think that will be pretty typical next year. It's already typical in some of these parks, but I think it's just going to get worse. So let me take a look at some of your questions. Okay, yeah, Deb already booked her camping. Good. Yeah, book it, you guys. If you see open spots, book it for sure. So let's see. Yes, the Grand Circle. Dana's doing the Grand Circle, which is like the Utah parks and down into Arizona and just like that whole area down there, which is so beautiful. Yes, we're planning to go RVing for a month through all the southern U.S. parks. Yeah. You know, I think a lot of people are going to do that next year. I'm planning on doing that next year. If you can get reservations, take them. Big changes may be coming to Teton next year. Yeah, I would not be surprised on that one. I think those poor campground hosts, you guys, they're volunteers and they were just slammed every day this summer. So I think there needs to be changes in Teton. Does camping at Theodore Roosevelt fill up quickly? Surprisingly, yes. It was hard to find camping there. So I would definitely look and take what you can. And David, planning Yellowstone and Teton next year, already booked some hotel rooms. Good. Yeah, you guys get on there and book. But again, expect camping not to be just like a pick up and go and you know, on a whim too much next year. I think it's going to be really crazy for the campgrounds. And some of them already are, but I think the ones that usually aren't still will be pretty crazy. So I just wanted to make sure we touched on that. Okay. So the sixth thing that you need to know before next year is in the national parks, hiking is one of the very best ways to find solitude. And if you've been following Dirt in My Shoes for a while, you know I love hiking. That's how I fell in love with the national parks, because I was too poor to do any of the tours or anything like that. So I'd go and I'd get a little campsite and I'd just go hiking. And, you know, truthfully, that's still pretty much what we do, because hiking, I think, is the best way to see the national parks. And I just want to encourage you to get out on the trails as much as you can. If you've purchased any of my itineraries, you'll notice for a couple of the parks especially. There's some longer trails that I'll break down into smaller pieces. So like I'll say, well, this trail is 11 miles total, but you really only need to do like the first, half a mile or a mile if you don't want to hike too far. Because I just think that if you can get out on the trail, even if you don't typically hike or you're not able to hike or you don't like to hike, I think that it's going to make a huge difference next year if you can kind of get out on some of these trails away from all the people. It just completely changes the experience. And so even if you're not going to finish a whole trail, or even if you don't want to go very far, there are a lot of trails that are certainly worth the time if you just want to go, 10 or 15 minutes. And so no matter what your situation is or kind of where you're at, if you have a love or hate for hiking, I think it's just going to make a huge difference next year. And I'm happy to give any suggestions if you have a park that you're thinking of going to, but you don't like to hike or aren't able to hike, or if you're in a wheelchair or anything like that, I can give you recommendations that will just, I think, transform your trip into something that will allow you to really feel like you're there, and to really soak in what makes the park so special, which is those views that you can't get to from your car. So again, I really think that hiking is just going to make a huge difference. It will get you away from the parking lots and, the viewpoints that just have a lot of people. One example that I want to share, because right now I'm writing some posts. I kind of dragged my feet on this because I didn't want to branch out into Canada because I focused so much on US national parks, but I've had so many questions about Banff and Jasper. And I figure since, a lot of you are doing Glacier with that, then it's kind of makes sense to also help you with Banff and Jasper up in Canada. So I'm writing those posts right now. But as I was going through my photos and I was looking at one of the most busy spots in Banff, actually. And when we were there, it's Peyto Lake, by the way, if you have ever seen Peyto Lake on any of the photos or anything, it's gorgeous. But so they have this view, like this viewing platform, and it's just slammed with people. It's crazy and actually pretty not relaxing. And there's people just everywhere, and there's people down below the viewing platform that's like not on the trail. And it was so crazy. Well, we had found a tip of there's a trail nearby that you can go hike, and it's not really marked or anything. You can go hike this trail and get basically the same view. And so we hiked. It probably only took us 20 minutes maybe from the main viewing platform. And I kid you not, we were the only ones there. We had this amazing, amazing view of Peyto Lake, and we were the only ones there. And so I just if you can get away from those main areas and just find a trail, in a lot of cases there, you don't have to go very far and you don't have to do much extra work, but there's better ways to see a lot of these places. So anyway, that's just kind of an example of that. I think if you can get on the trail, it will transform your trip. Because now when I see Peyto Lake, I don't think about the crowds. I think about that beautiful, beautiful lake that we saw, and it had the mountains all around it, and it had a rainbow. It was picture perfect, but it was so great. So yeah, Debbie, that's exciting. Banff and Jasper. It is. It's really exciting. And Donna, we hiked the trail you're talking. Yeah, it's so much nicer. So if you need help getting on the trails, that's where my passion lies. In the national parks. So if you need a trail recommendation, or you're not comfortable hiking, or you don't feel like you know what you're doing or anything, just let me know, because I think that's the best way to see the parks. So I can help you. Okay. And then, okay, and I saw a lot of questions for number 7. I saw a lot of these as I was going through your chat over here. And so number 7 is that smaller, less visited parks are great for social distancing. And that's something I would keep in mind next year. There are a lot of really great smaller parks that will be perfect for next year. And so I would say that a few of the ones that I personally really love going to is like Badlands, Lassen, North Cascades, Capitol Reef, Great Sand Dunes, Cuyahoga Valley. There's so many good ones, seriously. Theodore Roosevelt, someone had mentioned going there. There's so many good smaller parks. And so I know like they're not maybe as exciting as some of those heavy hitter parks. It's just like, you have to get to at least once in your lifetime, right? But for next year, I mean, it might be a really good idea to look into some of these smaller national parks. For example, so this summer we went to Bryce Canyon, and it was the least busy I've ever seen it. We got a really good deal on hotel, and we were hiking. We hiked the Queen's Garden Navajo Loop Peekaboo Trail, that whole figure 8 trail, and only saw like 3 people. And so I think, just some of these smaller parks. Oh, meanwhile, Zion is over there getting slammed. Like people are sleeping in their cars in the entrance line at 3 o'clock in the morning to get into Zion. And we're over here in Bryce Canyon, and it's just like, there's parking everywhere. There's nobody here. So, and I think the crowds in Bryce Canyon did pick up as summer went on. However, there's just something to say for those smaller parks. Sometimes you can have a really meaningful, wonderful experience in those parks. So just keep that in mind. If any of you have questions about some of those smaller parks, I'm happy to answer those. And let's see. Stephen, any good secret trails for kids in Death Valley? So Death Valley is cool because there's actually a lot of places you can go that are secret. So I actually am planning on writing a Death Valley itinerary because it's such a great place to go in the winter. We go there every winter because it's just awesome. But yeah, there's some good spots. And Death Valley is a good one. That one doesn't usually get too busy. So yeah, if you have any questions about smaller parks, but there are some really great ones out there. So, okay. The 8th thing that I think you need to know before you go next year, and this is mostly just a public service announcement, is that please leave the parks better than you find them. It has been so sad, actually. A lot of the parks this year has seen an increase in trash and graffiti and more problems along those lines. I think a lot of that is because people are going to the parks that don't normally go places like that or vacation like that, and it's just ignorance. They just don't know. They don't know that they're not supposed to carve their names in the trees, or I don't know, picking up trash, and that's just common sense. There's really no excuse for not picking up your trash. But things like that. And so just be aware, like for those of us that are seasoned park goers and spend a lot of time in these national parks, I've been hiking with garbage bags and picking things up as I hike. If you see somebody carving their name into something, just, be kind about it, but just say, hey, that's not really leaving the park better, and I would appreciate it if you wouldn't do that. And we've said things to people before and they've been real jerks about it. So again, don't don't get yourself in trouble or hurt or anything by confronting people. But unfortunately, it has been a bigger problem this year. And I think that we all need to kind of step up and say something or do something, like pick up the trash and stuff as we hike. Unfortunately, it's just becoming a bigger problem. So I did want to put that in there because I have noticed several parks, and there are some parks that are just more prone to that. What's interesting, the first time that I've been to Joshua Tree, so if you've ever been to Joshua Tree, you might also agree with me, but the first time I went to Joshua Tree, I was really surprised at how many people were off trail and how much garbage there was and how much rocks or carving in the rocks there was. There's some parks that are maybe closer to bigger cities and stuff that see an influx of people that just, you know, aren't as well taken care of. And those poor rangers are just like slammed with things. So if anything you can do to help protect these parks better would be much appreciated by many people. So I just wanted to put that in there. Unfortunately, it is a problem this year and will be next year probably. Okay, so number 9, you need to arrive prepared to be self-sufficient. So again, this kind of taps into the fact that a lot of the things that were closed this year were, you know, the visitor centers, restrooms. Sometimes the garbage cans weren't, you know, accepting garbage. And, you know, the lodges, restaurants, things like that. Those were the things that were closed. And a lot of like gas stations and stuff like that. You know, those things are the things that you'll want to think about as you go to the parks next year. So I always recommend, just if you can, having a full tank of gas and keeping water in your car, because sometimes it's really hard to find water, drinking water for before you go out hiking and stuff. And so it's just good to keep stuff like that in there. And then also, you know, where typically gas stations might have been open, if they're not open, you know, you may have to go a lot further without finding gas for your car. So just, you know, every day before you enter the park, making sure that you're full on gas and that you have food and water, you know, as well as all the other important things that you need. But just prepare to kind of pack stuff in and pack it out. Again, taking a trash bag with you, making sure you're taking your trash out in case you can't find garbage cans. And I always, as a mother of small children, I always say to make sure you stop at a restroom if you see one that's open, because you never know. And again, you know, it's more like they just didn't have the manpower in a lot of these parks this year to keep all of the restrooms open. You know, that they were trying to clean the restrooms more often and trying to keep things much more sanitized, and, you know, and that's a ton of work for those maintenance rangers. And so, you know, they were closing like every other restroom so that they could get to the ones that were open more often. So just keep that in mind as you're planning and stuff, kind of planning out to bring extra supplies and things, whereas in other years, you may not have had to think about that as much. And I don't know if they're going to be able to step up hiring and like hire more people, facilities, rangers and stuff to be keeping more stuff open. My guess is probably not really, because the parks don't generally have the budget and they're already short-staffed. So again, just prepare to be self-sufficient as you go into the parks as much as you can be. And, you know, hopefully most of it will be open next year, but we just don't know. So, okay. And here's my last one, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions you have for a few minutes. But the last thing that I think you need to know, and I think this is the most important thing, and if you follow me on my website at all, or if you've ever looked at Dirt in My Shoes, you know how important it is to me to go to these national parks with a plan. And so I already touched on this a little bit, but number 10, do not go without a plan. Don't go without a plan. So it doesn't matter if you don't like to have like a really detailed plan, that's fine. Some people don't like to travel like that. My husband is one person who doesn't like to travel like that. That's all me. I'm the crazy planner. So I understand, some people just like to be able to show up and just kind of decide what to do based on how you're feeling, or just if you see a cool spot to just pull off, and that's fine. But I really don't think that's going to cut it next year. I think you're going to need to have at least some semblance of a plan for your days while you're there. And that's just, again, it doesn't have to be a big set in stone plan, but like you need to know where you're staying. You need to know what you want to see that day, and, kind of what times you want to go. And, figure out if you're even going to get parking if you go at that time. Because with the additional crowding that I think we all anticipate next summer, there's just going to be more traffic problems and more circling of parking lots and more elbow to elbow views. And so it's just having some semblance of a plan is going to make a huge difference. So I would just suggest, if you need help planning out your days, I mostly, for 99% of people who email me and come to me for trip planning, pretty much recommend going with one of my itineraries if I have one, because that really is exactly what I would do. And that's exactly what I tell my friends to do, and it's what I tell my family to do. So, of course, I'm passing that on to you, my new friends. But if you don't want an hour by hour plan, at least know where you want to go first. I don't recommend, just getting up and eating a big breakfast and sitting around if you want to go see some things for the day, especially some of the more popular places. I always recommend getting up and going there as early as you can, or waiting until later in the day. We're talking like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and venturing out to some of those busy spots as well. But the hours in most parks, the hours from like 9 to 3 are pretty slammed. And so that's where just having a better idea of what you want to do and where you want to be is going to make a huge difference for your trips next year. So I'm seeing Jim over here says, always hit the main sites early as possible. Yeah, for sure. And, we always joke, we're like, national park trips are not relaxing for us. They're rejuvenating, because it's not so much sleeping in and eating a bunch of good food and just kind of, going to the pool. It's not a relaxing vacation like that. But it's rejuvenating. You get up early, you go out, you see things, you're up before, most of the people are there, and you see the wildlife, you get the solitude, all of that. It's just, it's a really cool way to experience the park. And I think it's going to make even a bigger difference this year than it has in years past. So I just wanted to say that, and then tell you, Linda, my husband and I watched from Dakota Dunes, South Dakota. Nice. I love South Dakota, you guys. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. Karen, what are some smaller parks in the eastern U.S.? There are some really good ones. I really like Cuyahoga Valley. That one surprised me, but that one's pretty cool, and it's not very well known. You've got like Congaree and stuff down, if you want to go down south, Congaree and Biscayne, Dry Tortugas, stuff down there. The cool thing about the East, here's the cool thing that I think about the East is they have so many smaller historic sites. So they're not national parks necessarily. We've got a lot more historic sites and stuff like that are small, that wouldn't be busy, just like all over the East. So I would try something like that, or you could do like Voyagers or Isle Royale or some somewhere like that that's just not as busy. But those smaller sites, man, those are so cool. We went to the Salem Maritime. I think it's a historic site or something like that. And it was awesome. There's just like so much history packed in on the east. So Cumberland Gap. The Blue Ridge Parkway is beautiful. Anywhere over there. Yeah, Shenandoah. Shenandoah is a good one. I'm going to put this up here for those of you that don't have questions. I promised discounted itineraries. So typically I only do a sale on the itineraries over Black Friday, but I was thinking about it and I thought, you know what, really for next year, I wouldn't wait till Black Friday to plan. I would do it now. And so I'm going to go ahead and discount the itineraries 20%, which is what I do on Black Friday every year. But they're going to be discounted starting now and going until Monday night. So if you guys want to go, it's dirtinmyshoes.com/travel2021. That will take you to the page that has the discount code and everything there for you. And so you can pick one of those up, again, only for a couple days. And that way you can get started planning, especially these bigger parks, you guys. These bigger parks, you need to be planning now if you're thinking of going to those next year. So, and if you have any questions, so I really pride myself on answering questions. I'm really good at answering questions in email and everything like that because I want your trip to be amazing. And so if you get an itinerary and you have questions about it, shoot me an email. I help kind of personalize it a little bit more to them. But for the most part, these itineraries will cover most situations. So if you're wanting an hour by hour plan, that's a good way to do it. So I will just put that up there and you can go check those out. And then I will answer some questions. So thank you for any of you who don't have questions and who came in to join me. I really appreciate you taking time tonight and stay in touch. So let's go through some of these. Let's see. Best time of year to go to the Everglades from Monica. Yes, Deb says not the summer. So my dad is actually from Florida, and so we know you do not go to Florida in the summer. Okay, so I've tried to plan a trip to the Everglades for like the past 3 years, and I've always aimed for like January, February. You're beyond hurricane season, you're before summer heat. So somewhere tucked in there is a really good time for Florida. Okay, William and Helen, thank you so much. Keep up your wonderful work. Thank you. I love doing it. I love doing it. And what's been fun is I've been getting messages from people who have actually met other people at the park on the same trail who are both following the itinerary. And I'm so happy about that. I'm just hoping one day that I will actually be there too. I would love to be there with some of you. So, Roberta, how do we find if a state requires COVID test to enter the state? The park, so from a park perspective, most of the parks will say something on the website if you do, but not all. And so in that case, you would have to go directly to the state to find out what their regulations are. So Jim, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Okay, thinking of doing Yellowstone and Glacier in April or May, too early due to snow cold. Yes. I don't recommend Yellowstone in April pretty much ever because the thing is that they shut down, like they have, like winter in Yellowstone is awesome. There's a lot to do actually winter in Yellowstone, but like starting like end of March-ish, they are switching over to summer. And so they're starting to plow roads and stuff like that. So you can't do winter and you can't do summer because the roads aren't open yet. And so that's why April is not a good time for Yellowstone, typically, because unless you just want to, drive the road from Gardner to Cook City, which is pretty much the only thing open that time of year, but you can't snowmobile, you can't, cross-country ski on the roads or anything like that. So, and then Glacier, you'll be so limited in what you can do. Even in June, the Going to the Sun Road isn't typically open up to Logan Pass, at least until later June. And so for those parks, if you're going to do off season in those parks, I typically, and you haven't been before and you still want to do all the stuff, I typically recommend either like late June, like you could go to Yellowstone mid-June and then work your way to Glacier and hope that the road is open, or September typically. For those mountainous parks, it's just hard. The season is so short. And so trying to go that early will be really limiting in what you can do. And that's just weather related. That's not, 2021 related. So, okay, Kristen, are you adding any new ones soon? I'm assuming you mean itineraries. Okay, so here's the ones I'm thinking. I don't add an itinerary unless I really feel like I know the park inside and out. Like I've done it. I've been everywhere. I've been to places multiple times during the day to kind of make sure that know that I know when the crowding is less than what's normal during the day. So these are the ones on my list. I have them written over here. Canyonlands, Black Hills, Death Valley, Joshua Tree, Sequoia, Mount Rainier, Olympic are the big ones that are coming up next-ish. They take me a while to write because I'm too thorough. I'm too much of a perfectionist. But those are the ones. And then, as I said before, I'm writing posts on Banff and Jasper right now, and I am toying with the idea of itineraries for those. Just because they required so much research, so much research to really get in there and dig in really well to those parks. And so I think an itinerary would be really helpful. Let's see. Jillian, do you ever take tag-alongs with you? That's my neighbor. And yes, for neighbors, I do. Actually, you guys, I'm really wanting to get to the point where I can maybe have like a group camp or something and do a little bit of service and have you guys join me, like either helping out, because I've still got contacts in some of these national parks. I just think it'd be really fun to like put together a Dirt in My Shoes group. We go visit the park, go sightsee, do a little bit of service, maybe meet some behind the scenes rangers, people that you don't normally see. I think would just be so cool. So I am working towards that. Time of year, Rick says, time of year suggestions for Redwoods National Park. Yeah, that one, it's pretty temperate. So as far as actually being in that park, because it's right on the ocean, you don't get the big swings in temperature, but you will get more rain and stuff during certain times of the year. So, summer is good. If you want to see whales and stuff, you've got to go, I think it's springtime. We missed the whales. We really wanted to see those. So, but again, with Redwoods, I wouldn't worry as much about the weather because even in the summer, it really doesn't get that hot. So it stays a lot more temperate. But yeah, spring, summer, fall, or winter if you don't mind a little more cold. Cheryl says September in Glacier was fantastic. Yeah, if you can avoid the fires, that's my only reservation with like August and September in some of those parks is that the wildfires out west just get so terrible. And it's been like this for, years. I just feel like it's gotten so much worse lately. So, for example, like Glacier this year, there was a lot of smoke in the skies, for a good portion of August and September. Not every day, because depending on the day, the wind will blow some stuff out and stuff. But then you have like, Rocky Mountain, which has had a wildfire burning up in there since July. And it's, now they had to close down the whole park and evacuate all the communities around it. And so it's really, really bad there right now. So, and it's the end of October, which is crazy. So just keep that in mind if you're planning a fall trip in some of these Western parks, a lot of these mountainous parks that have wildfire seasons. That's just something to keep in mind. But it can be perfect. It can be really, really nice. Okay, Deb, where are the posts on Banff and Jasper? They're not done yet. They will be done in the next few weeks. If you're on my email list, then you'll get the email for that when they're released. So, but definitely before Thanksgiving, those ones will be done. Okay, Kristen, yay, itineraries. Yes, I know. They take me a long time, but I'm really excited about these new ones. So, okay, when do your park plans change frequently? We were going to do Banff and Glacier this September, but have decided to look at doing it in 2022. Would it make sense to purchase your Glacier guide now, even with our trip not scheduled for 2 years? That's a really good question. So the general schedule of the parks, of the itineraries, typically doesn't change unless something big happens. Also, the parks don't add new trails and stuff that often, but if they do, that obviously gets updated into the itineraries. So for Glacier, I would guess it's probably going to look pretty much the same in 2022. What I do is every year I update them, and I just did a huge overhaul of all the itineraries in May of this year. So if you've bought my itineraries in the past and haven't bought one since May, they're so much better. They're much more easy to use. They're easier to print. And I don't plan on doing another big overhaul like that within 2 years. It was just a ton of work, and I really love them the way they are. So I don't think much will change, but I do go in and update. Like if Glacier is talking about kind of changing their shuttle system a little bit, and that's something I've been following, but they haven't released details on that. And so that's something that would get changed in the itineraries as it happens. So it's a good question. If it were me, I would probably wait. I would probably wait until you're for Glacier, it's about 13 months out usually is when they start opening up lodging reservations and stuff like that. So maybe a little bit before that. But I don't anticipate it changing. I'll just say that. I don't anticipate it changing. But if you want to make sure you have the most up-to-date, I don't update the itineraries for temporary closures or construction or anything like that. Those are things that I send out in a separate email to go with the itinerary. And I update those emails weekly so that they stay really up-to-date. So you wouldn't get that information straight from me, but then you could always email me and I can, help you change things around if needed. So it's up to you. If you really want to start planning, then you could get it now and it will really help you start planning and getting things in place. And then if you have questions as it gets closer to your trip, just shoot me an email. That would be fine too. So, Monica, not sure if you'll know this one, but the best park for kids 9 and 7 on bikes, prefer dirt over pavement. I'm trying to think just off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of ones that have mostly dirt trails because there are some good ones, some good parks for pavement biking. The first thing that came to my mind actually was the Moab area because there are so many biking trails up there. And that's where I would recommend, not necessarily in the parks per se, but there's so much beautiful stuff out there. and lots of different kinds of trails and awesome biking out there. So that was the first thing that popped to my mind. It's not necessarily in the national parks, but the whole area is just amazing. So that's Moab, Utah. You've got Arches and Canyonlands right there. When we had rented a camper van in Calgary and we're going to drive through Banff and then to Glacier and then to East Glacier and back to Calgary. Yes, a lot of people do it all. I mean, that's really a popular route. And, Jasper's up there, which is amazing. Yoho is not that far from Banff. In fact, from like Lake Louise, you're only 20 minutes to Yoho, which is amazing. So there's so much good stuff to do up there. And then she says, but then the border was closed. Yep, just replan it. Try it again. That's kind of the motto this year, huh? Monica, I will take pavement. Okay. Yeah. So we've been biking. Grand Teton has really good biking because they have a whole path, a multi-use path that goes from the town of Jackson all the way up to Jenny Lake. And so you're talking, I want to say it's probably, 12 miles or so, 12 to 15 miles. And so you can bike that and you have the Tetons off in your view pretty much the whole way, which is just amazing. And it's mostly flat. There are a couple hills, but it's mostly flat. So it's kind of fun for kids, especially younger kids. And then Cuyahoga Valley has a really fun one. Acadia has some good biking. Acadia has the carriage roads, which are dirt. So that's a good option. That just came to my mind. So there's some really fun ones. Great Smoky Mountains, you can bike through Cades Cove. And this year they just did a pilot where they actually closed down a whole day and didn't let any cars in and just let bikers drive through Cades Cove, which is awesome. So if they do that again next year too, that would be a really good option for a pavement. So yeah, there's some good ones. Okay, Nancy, Ryan Mountain is my favorite hike in Joshua Tree. That one is a good one. I do love that one. Joshua Tree, I have a really good love for Joshua Tree. It's so different. It's such a different type of park, and there's some really cool things. If you've never done rock climbing in Joshua Tree, that is a bucket list. Like, oh my gosh, so amazing, so much fun. You can contact Cliffhanger Guides and tell them I sent you because they were really great. Okay, well, I think I worked my way through most of the questions. I'm really glad that you guys joined me tonight. Thank you so much. And I hope to be doing these more often so that you can just ask your questions in real time and we can talk through the parks and stuff like that. But I think 2021 is going to be a really great year for the national parks, especially people who have plans. Especially if if you can get started now. Just get on there, make your lodging is the first thing I would do. I would make your lodging recommendation or reservations. And if you need recommendations for those lodging, the itineraries do come with lodging guides and they do map out where, like, the area I would stay in before each day. So that helps too if you're trying to plan. So anyway, if I missed any of your questions, I will go back through all of this and I will try to answer within the next day or two. And happy Halloween, everyone. I hope that you have a great weekend and we will talk to you soon.